on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
You know, a lot of those efforts by publishing companies seem quite sort of cynical and just bang them out, you move on to the next one. And, you know, obviously as a self-publisher, it's all down to you. It's a different business model. You just, as long as you can keep driving it.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome. It is the Self-Publishing Show with me, James Blatch.
And me, Mark Dawson.
How are you, Mark Dawson?
I'm all right, James Blatch. Not too bad.
In your house today?
Yep, in the house today with a gardener tootling around outside. So if anyone hears a lawnmower, that's what that is. And also have builders trundling past in dumper trucks with rubble.
You don't have a robot cutting your grass?
No, we don't. We have a. Well, I don't think he's a robot. If he is, he's very it's very lifelike.
You can do a replicant test. Ask him a few questions.
I could do. That's true.
Yeah, good. Okay, little Blade Runner reference. Right, let us press on with this week's non-chit chat stuff. We have a webinar coming up in a couple of days on the 28th of June, which is a Monday, I believe. Should we just check that? Today, I think it is, yes, June the 28th is Monday. It'll be 9 o'clock in the UK, so a little earlier in the US and a little very early the next day in the Antipodeans in Australia and New Zealand. And this is on Amazon Ads, and it's with Janet Margot, who's become our go-to guru on Amazon Ads, somebody who worked at the coalface literally on the project inside Amazon. So she's a very, very good person to talk to us about how to use them. And like all these platforms, there's the juice, the profit is in the detail. It's not just setting up a campaign and forgetting about it. Forget about it. It's about understanding exactly what you're doing all the way through the process to find the profit. It is there for you, but you do need to work at it. This is going to be a great webinar for you to attend. If you go to selfpublishingformula.com/Amazon, you will be able to sign up for that webinar. Mark and I will be with you. Well, it should probably be just you and Janet, actually, I think, on Monday night. I get a night off. And in addition to that, there are a couple of other webinars which we've run, which you may have missed, which were BookBub and Fuse Books. We talked to Fuse Books like a foundational, all the things you need to have in place to start making profit with your books. And BookBub Ads clearly is a more detailed one about BookBub Ads. But if you sign up for the Amazon ads, we will make sure you get replay links to those as well. So you have a lot of learning to do. Get lots of coffee in. Sit down in front of your computer, make notes. Each one of those webinars, promise you, has actionable insights for you to take away and implement in your author career. Okay. We don't have, I think, a lot to talk about outside of that this week, Mark. I mean, any big publishing news from Unputdownable?
No, not massively. I'm quite close now to launching the next. Got two launches coming up. We've got on Monday the German launch of the 16th book in the Milton series, which is had coming up to 1,500 pre-orders, which is quite cool. And then on the 2 weeks on Monday, or a week on Monday, the next Milton book, Milton 19, goes live, and that's 13,000 pre-orders, I think, on that one now. So
wow.
That's really great. So looking forward to that, and I'm so pleased with how that one's turned out and the response from readers. And it also ends on a little bit of what I call an open loop. So not really a cliffhanger, but it leads directly into the 20th book. And as the 20th, I want to do something a little bit different, more special for that. I've started working on that one as well, rather than something else I was going to do. So yeah, it's all going well. Milton is as popular as ever.
He never seems to get old, Milton. Does he get old?
He ages slowly, but yeah, probably not quite at the. If he aged at the normal rate, I'd have to retire him a little earlier than I might want to.
He's like the opposite of a dog.
What kind of longer years?
Well, they get 7 years for each one of their life. He has to live 7 years just at age 1.
Yeah, something like that.
That's
I should probably work it out.
If you can bottle that and sell it. That would be good. Good. Okay, look, our interviewee today is James Russell, all the way from New Zealand in Auckland. James is a very energetic marketer of his books, very entrepreneurial, started life as a journalist, has written children's books with a special little technological twist, which I think you're going to find very interesting. And also I think you'll find interesting his story of persistence in marketing and trying to be successful and commercially successful with his books. So let's hear from James.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Okay, James Russell, welcome to the podcast all the way from New Zealand. We always have a really clear, strong signal when I contact New Zealand. As I often point out to people, you are the UK's antipodes. You can't be further, unless maybe there's a point in the ocean nearby New Zealand that's actually opposite me, but you're very close to opposite me now.
They're a long way away. I've done that trip many times.
It's a very,
thanks for having me.
It's a very long flight. You're very welcome. So
nothing on the second Kiwi on the show, and you had Steph Green not so long ago.
Yeah, we had Steph. I don't think you're the second ever, but you are probably the second recently. Yes, we had Steph for her second visit. And at some point, we keep saying this, at some point we will get down to your part of the world, not only because it's a lovely place to visit, and I've never been to New Zealand, but only Australia so far. But we've got it's a big indie thing going on in New Zealand and Australia at the moment, so we're really keen to meet some people. Indeed. Yeah, stay in the Hobbit's house. Now, we're going to be talking picture books, which is great because we talk novels a lot and we occasionally talk non-fiction, and this is an area that is interesting to me. We've had a couple of examples before of people doing very well with print on demand and print versions of books that do better when they're physical in your hand than they do as ebooks. And it is a challenge. It has its own challenges, but I think you've made a really great job of this, James, by the looks of it. So why don't we start with a bit about you, your background, and how you got into this writing lark?
Sure, yes. So I was a journalist for a long time, about 16 years. And like most children's writers, I started writing children's books when my children were born, my two sons. So I wrote 3 picture books, The Dragon Hunters, The Dragon Tamers, and The Dragon Riders, and I wrote them on the train to and from work at the New Zealand Herald. And then every afternoon, my children and my wife would pick me up from the train station, and of course, I had to have a few more verses written. So they're all written. The first 3 picture books are written in verse. So beside an ancient forest, before you reach the sea, you'll find a tiny cottage and a happy family. So they're about 2 boys and a dragon. Their dog's stolen by a dragon, and they go off in search of it to rescue the dog. And that kicks off a whole bunch of adventures over the 3 books. So I launched those. They weren't supposed to be books, but I interviewed somebody here in New Zealand that was a self-publisher. And I came away from that so sort of fired up. I thought, I'm going to give this a go. So I found an illustrator, made all kinds of mistakes, but ended up with a book in my hand, The Dragon Hunters, in 2012. And over the next 2 years, I published the next 2. And then I started, after that, they were doing really well. I was made redundant from my job at the Herald, kind of out of the blue. And I thought, right, what am I going to do? I got obviously a redundancy check. I'd been there about 11 years. And I went straight to Bologna, to the book fair, children's book fair. And I filled up a backpack full of these picture books, and I took them. And I found I got a deal with Source Books in America, a trade deal. And that was great. So that they paid me a nice advance. I had my redundancy money. And then I thought, right, what now? And I wrote The Dragon Defenders, which was my first children's junior novel, so middle grade novel. And I wrote 2 of those in the first year, and they both went to #1 here in New Zealand.
Wow.
And I was away. I was making enough money then to kind of forge a career as a writer and a self-publisher. So I self-published the picture books here in New Zealand. They were traditionally published. They've been traditionally published in about a dozen countries now around the world. But I've self-published my novels here in New Zealand as well. And now I've just recently launched them on Amazon, the novels, that is. So the picture books are on Amazon through Source Books, but I'm doing my own thing with the novels. They've been traditionally sold to, I think, Turkey and the Czech Republic. But the English language versions I'm launching on Amazon at the moment. So I launched them in January, and they're going really well. They're doing very well. So that's encouraging.
Okay, let me ask you, unpick a couple of those points. So first of all, you said you didn't intend them to be a book when you wrote the stories. Were you literally just writing them for your children just to remain in the house? You didn't think this would be a book? Okay.
Exactly, yeah. But I think I did what a lot of writers do. I was reading books to my kids in bed at night thinking, I can do better than this. That's an average book. A lot of those efforts by publishing companies seem quite sort of cynical and just bang them out, sell a few, move on to the next one. And, obviously as a self-publisher, it's all down to you. It's a different business model. You just, as long as you can keep driving it. So I've sold about 90,000 books in New Zealand across my 8 books, which is, amazing for a self-published author with no budget. And in fact, that's, the average print run in New Zealand is probably 2,000 or 3,000 books. And I print 5,000 at a time, and I've reprinted them many times.
Wow. Yeah, outperforming the industry in New Zealand. And the verse, it's the little bit you quoted us there. I can remember when my children were younger, they're older teenagers now, but I remember really enjoying reading, the Gruffalo, I suppose, and the Snail and the Whale. If people know those books, are in verse, the most famous ones. It's actually a really pleasing thing for adults as well, because I have to say, some children's books I just didn't enjoy reading to my kids. I couldn't. If I never read another Enid Blyton in my life, I'll be happy. But there's something lovely about reading well-written verse.
Yeah, I loved it. I have to say that when I was reading Dr. Seuss to my children, I would hold some of the pages together to get through it. There, I counted the words in those. There are about 1,000 to 1,200 words and green eggs and ham. So. And I thought, that's too long, because I'd put the pages together and I'd turn them and, my son would go,
cheating your children.
Did I silly me? It's just trying to get through them. But so mine are, I optimized the word length. Mine are about 500 to 600. And I reckon that's about the right length. But it took me, they're hard to write, rhyming verse, you got to be so economical. I'd take train trips. I'd take 4 or 5 train trips working on one verse. And then I'd be walking home, and on my 10-minute walk home, and I'd get 4 done, Yeah. So it would take me almost as long to write one of those as it does to write, a 30,000-word middle-grade novel.
And had you done any writing like that before? You're obviously a journalist covering, I guess, news stories, or were you doing features and more sort of artistic writing with a paper?
Yeah, I was the editor of a sort of sustainable business and lifestyle magazine. So I'd done lots of sort of normal journalism, all kinds of things, really. But my last 4 years were editing. So that was kind of a handy skill as well.
Yeah. And this moment you went to Bologna, took yourself off and hawked your books around. Just tell me exactly how that conversation went. You walked up to people with a copy of your book.
Exactly. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had a really loose plan. I'd sort of done some Googling, whatever. I was Googling each night, but it's big. Those book fairs are huge. And I was walking around, and this was on the last day, and I was knackered, and I'd had enough. And I saw this beautiful couch in a stand, and I didn't even care what the stand was or what they did. I thought it was publishing services. Anyway, I thought, I'm going to go and sit on that. And I sat down on it, and this lady came out from the back. She was knackered as well, sat down beside me. And it turned out to be Dominic Rackar, the head of Source Books. So she goes, hey, how you going? And I was like, yeah, good. And what are you doing? She says, and I said, I'm trying to get a publisher. She goes, give me a look. So I handed them to her, and she flicked through them for about 20 or 30 seconds, just flick, 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 flick. And she just immediately said, I'll publish those.
Wow.
And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. So I got, getting that deal it came at the perfect time, because I'd been made redundant. I didn't have enough to live on very long, but with my redundancy money and the advance I got on those books, I had about 7 or 8 months of grace where I wrote those 2 novels. So it was perfect time.
So that was an anxious flight out and a happy flight back.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, funnily enough, I didn't know, I had no idea what to do with a contract. And I was running around the back of her stand to another lady that I'd met, just sort of got talking to, and she was an agent. And so I was just saying, can you help me? I don't know what to do. And she said, yeah, I can help you. And then she said, come out for dinner, we'll celebrate your deal. And I was so naive, I didn't realize she was an agent until we were sitting at dinner that night.
And she was signing you?
Yeah, no. She had I said, would you do this for me? Would you, negotiate this deal and become my agent? And she did. She said, sure, I'd love to, So it was a good deal for her probably because she didn't have to find the deal. I'd already found it. But she stayed on as my agent then for about, 3 or 4 years. But we've parted company now because I want to go on this. I want to do this on my own with Amazon and see how I go.
I think this is the great
Ingram Spark, and I'm doing, and I've done audio books. So actually, The other thing I should mention is all of my books, both the picture books and the novels, have an augmented reality component. And what that means is that you download a free app on an iPad or a phone or whatever you like, and you. I know that some people are watching it on YouTube, and I can explain what's happening. But you download this app, get your iPad, and I'm opening the picture book to the map, which is on the end. It's on the end papers of the picture books, and when I hold the iPad over the top, this is going to be the world's worst demonstration.
Things never work when you try and demonstrate them. Oh, there we go. There you go.
So the whole thing goes 3D. You can hear the kids running around.
Wow.
And so you've got the map turns into a 3D landscape. And by the time you're finished, there are two dragons flying around. The boys are riding on the back of it. So it's quite amazing. And you can zoom in close and check out their house in detail. And you can spin the map around and all this sort of thing. And then when you get to the novels, in the novels, there are 4 or 5 pages in each novel that have a symbol of an iPad or a phone on the bottom of them. And when you hold the iPad up to those, it turns into a 3D.
Yes, examine
some of them turn into 3D models.
Yeah.
And you can actually have a look around it and you can go inside these things.
So for people listening, I have to describe what happened. So James held up the iPad, which was basically on camera mode, to a landscape in the younger children's picture book. And it suddenly became this 3-dimensional landscape with movement on it and people and noise and sound. And then a similar experience with the paperback, a smaller picture of a boat, which then became a 3D boat that you could examine on the inside and outside by moving the iPad around. Very clever stuff. So how did that happen?
Some of them are super high tech, like those 3D things. But then you have videos of the bad guy giving a rant. So this is the one I'm holding up now is the evil guy in the books.
He looks evil.
And you can see that he looks a lot like me. And he will give a rant about something. And so when you get to that page, you'll see the evil guy and he'll talk to you and he'll tell you what's going on. And in fact, those are very low tech. And because I starred in those videos, or some of them are audio files, some of them are codes that you hold the iPhone up to, and it will unscramble the code written on the page. And it'll work on a Kindle as well, so you can hold up a phone and point it at the Kindle.
Okay, that's brilliant. And how did that come about then? Was this your idea? Did someone suggest this to you?
A friend of mine came to stay, and he was sort of involved in this 3D design business. And he had a business card, and he put it on the desk, and he held his phone over it, and a weird little orb started floating above it. And I thought, I'd never seen anything like it. It was amazing. And I said to him, could this work with my books? And he said, I don't see why not. So I had it built. So it was a kind of a long, slow process, and to be truthful, quite expensive. But and I knew it was a risk because you have to get these 3D models, made, and but it's paid off handsomely. So it's an amazing kind of sales tool for a shop to go, these also do this.
Right.
But it's the other thing that's been extremely gratifying for the middle grade novels. I get so many parents emailing saying, my kids, they just get drawn through the book because they want to get to this next bit of augmented reality digital content. And it's not a game. You look at it once, you watch a video, you uncrack the code. They spend very little time with a device in their hand, but it pulls them through. And so that combined with a really exciting kind of plot, it's an extremely strong. It really encourages those reluctant readers to read the books.
Yeah.
So that's been great. And the other thing that I did, I got thinking, right, I can use this augmented reality. I can use this app that I've got to do these whiz-bang 3D things. That's all fine, but I thought I can use this another way. So what I've done now is I've made audiobooks of my 3 picture books. And when you hold the app and point it at the cover of the 3 picture books, a little play symbol will come up, tap on that, and you can just pop the iPad down beside you, hear the audiobook being read to you, and turn the pages when you hear the ding. So it's the equivalent of, when they put the CD in the sleeve and the front cover. But, it's moved into the modern age. Now you're using a device to listen to the audiobook rather than having to, no one has a CD player anymore. It's amazing. Some people still put those CDs out,
Yeah.
Who's playing them? I've
still got a CD player. I've got a record player. That's trendy now. That seems to take the role of tired parents who may not want to read for half an hour to their children in the evening, although it's really important that you do that. But
absolutely, I agree. Yeah, but it's all kind of adds to the package. Yeah. So you've got that picture book. It's an audio book at the same time. It comes for nothing, and you can turn the map on the end papers into a 3D landscape, and it all makes it an attractive package. And kids will go to it and read it themselves. You don't want them only reading when you're putting them to bed. You want them reading all the time.
And James, you're sure that these have helped sell the books? These augmented reality?
Undoubtedly, yeah, incredibly. So I can tell how many downloads the app has had. I've got all that data. So they've worked incredibly well, and they seem to be. I've put little videos on Amazon to describe what happens. There's a small video that you can see on any of the books on Amazon that sort of sums up that augmented reality. And those are. I took the numbers this morning actually for you. I started in January. I think it was January the 11th, and I've sold 1,687 books as of this morning. So they're going quite well, and I'm paying for advertising, so I'm not really making much money. Jeff's making lots of money at the moment out of me.
That's how it works.
But I haven't kind of factored, there's very little read-through factored into that. And I've got 4 books up there at the moment, the 4 novels, and I'm going to drop the 5th one at the end of this month.
Great.
So, when read-through goes into
your early picture books, you self-publish those everywhere else in the world that's not true. Well, you self-publish them in New Zealand?
Only in New Zealand.
Only in New Zealand, and they're trad published everywhere else. Okay, and so let me just break that down a little bit so we know how these various deals and various projects have worked. Your trad aspect, you got an advance, and has that earned out? And are you earning money from those deals now?
Yes, it has earned out. I've had a couple of royalty checks since then. They're not big.
Okay.
I think the trajectory is plateaued and it's probably on the way down.
Okay.
Whereas in New Zealand, they just keep going. They keep selling.
Yeah, that's frustrating, isn't it?
The other thing I didn't mention, of course, is that the 3 picture books, the characters in the 3 picture books are the same characters in the novels.
Right.
So the story continues, and in fact, it actually continues sort of. If you read the 3 picture books and then start on the first novel, it'll give you the background of what's happened in the picture books. But my American publisher didn't want to take the novels, and I guess that's because they didn't sell the picture books didn't sell as well as they thought. I think they sold around 60,000, but they didn't take the novels, which I thought they kind of missed a trick because you can use the novels to sell the picture books and the other way around.
Yeah. And
I don't know of any other series that I'd love to hear if anyone knows. I'd love them to leave it in the comments or whatever on YouTube. But I've never heard of another series that started off as picture books.
Yeah.
and then moves into middle grade novels.
I think that is quite difficult. It's quite interesting what you've achieved there, because I think if you're a child and you progress to reading novels, we call them novels, but yeah, effectively novels for children, you almost don't want to be reading what you were reading, because at that stage, when you move through the stages, you want to grow up, right? You want to be older. Oh, I'm reading bigger books now. It's not like if there was a Snail and the Whale novelization, you probably wouldn't choose it as a 9-year-old because you did that when you were 6. But you've got something going there, which is a little bit, I think, intrigue early on, that children clearly do want to read in more depth when they get older.
Yeah. I mean, if you pick up the first novel, it's about these 2 boys living on an island, a deserted island, this kind of paradise island in the middle of nowhere. They have to catch or grow any of their food. They live with their family. Paddy's an expert with the bow and arrow. Flynn's an expert with the slingshot, and they share this island with dragons. And then there's a bad guy that gets wind of it, and he wants to capture them for himself. He thinks he's going to be rich and famous if he becomes the dragon master. And they have to stop him. That's essentially what happens over the course of the 5 books. And so they're quite sophisticated in terms of the language and the story for that 8 to 12 age group. But then I remember I was sitting watching TV with my 2 boys. We were watching Harry Potter, and I was looking at Hermione thinking what a character she is. And I thought, I need a Hermione. So the Pitbull, the bad guy, has a niece, and he's cruel to her, and she's forced to go live with him, but she becomes the heroine of the story. So she arrives in book 2 and plays a major part through the rest of the books. So in that way also it appeals to girls as well as boys.
That sounds good. I don't know if this is true, but I do remember hearing somebody once say about Dora the Explorer that was basically created by a committee, and they said their idea at the beginning was a strong female heroine, because the girls will watch her and the boys will watch what the girls watch. But the girls were the leaders in choosing what to watch, and they are, generally, I think girls, certainly in my case, my daughter and son, I think my daughter led what was watched and what was read, so that worked out. Okay, so you have your Bop's going off. You had your trad deal. You're self-publishing those books in New Zealand. The middle grade books, then. So you sat down, and instead of continuing with the picture books, which presumably you could have done another 3 of those, another sort of series or whatever, why did you want to write middle grade? Was it because your children were growing older?
Yeah, they were. I don't know, just to keep things interesting, I guess. They were growing older, and I did want to write for them. But actually, at the end of The Dragon Riders, the 3rd picture book, the dragon flies off and goes back to its own kind. And in fact, my American publisher, Sourcebook, they went, "You can't do that. You'll break the children's hearts," But that's the way it finishes in New Zealand.
There's no Hollywood ending.
No, not at all. I kind of like it. It's kind of poignant. But anyway, I was reading this to some really young children, and there was a little girl in the front, and she was incensed by this ending. She got so mad at me. She stood up in front of all of her classmates and went, "That ending sucks."
Oh.
Yeah, it was very funny. And anyway, that was kind of it was a bit of the catalyst for writing the first Dragon Defenders novel to carry it on. And yeah, it was. I think I've really enjoyed writing the middle grade novels. I've come to the end. I think my dragon run is over, and now I've written 1 novel for adults in the first lockdown here in New Zealand, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through the second one, and I'm going to release the 2 of those. So I think it's more about amusing myself and keeping it interesting.
Has that carried on any elements from those first 2 series?
No, it's entirely different. No, okay. These are, I love surfing. I'm a big surfer. So, excuse me. These are based in the world of surfing.
Okay.
And there are kind of 2, for me, there are 2 seminal works, 2 seminal novels that are based in the world of surfing. And one of them is by Tim Winton. That's called Breath. And the other one's called Barbarian Days. And the way that those 2 writers write about the act of surfing and waves and all this is just poetic. It's amazing. And it was kind of an itch that I had to scratch. I think I wanted to do it. So I've written these 2 novels, they're not all about surfing. They're just based in the world of surfing. they've got, one of them's set in Ireland where I used to live for a long time, and the other one's kind of set up in the Indonesian archipelago. So those have been a lot of fun. But I realized when I looked on Amazon, and I thought, there is a massive hole in the market here. There is 33 million surfers in the world, and no one is writing for them. No one. And I obviously hope that it can have a much broader kind of readership than just surfers, because essentially the books aren't about surfing; they're just set in this backdrop. But I saw this big opportunity, and it was something that I kind of feel passionate about anyway. And I thought, it's a no-brainer.
Right, what you love, you enjoy writing about it's going to help. So your self-published middle grade novels, how have you set about? What's your sort of marketing campaign around them?
Well, it was odd because I couldn't sort of launch them on Amazon because they were already launched. They've been out for a few years. So it was strange. All I could do was email my database and say, I'm putting these on Amazon. I would love it if you would write a review. And I got I think I'm on about 34 reviews for book one, but they're all kind of glowing reviews, which is nice. And there's probably, I don't know, maybe even 5 or 6 for number 2, but I'm concentrating all my marketing efforts on Amazon advertising. I've got Mark's course and I've been working my way through that. And so I'm concentrating all my efforts on the first book. But it's interesting because I get about I'm doing the print on demand, and I get about $3 for every copy that's sold. So it's a bit painful for me, really, because I'm used to getting 10,
Yeah.
I sell them to shops here in New Zealand. Every bookstore in New Zealand sells them, and they do really well, So having to pay Amazon for all this advertising and then only getting $3 for each one is hard. But I realised the size of the market. I had a look a few minutes ago. I've sold 40 books already this morning. It's only 8 o'clock in the morning.
Nice.
So I feel like there's potential there for it to really go.
And these are Kindle as well, right?
Kindle as well. So I've done Kindle, print on demand paperback, print on demand hardback. And I produced the first 2 audiobooks of the middle grade novels, number 1 and 2, and I'll record number 3 shortly.
Where are you doing the hardback POD? Because it's a limited rollout at the moment, isn't it? But
yeah, so that was the beta. They sent me an email, so do you want to be involved? But it's $8 to print on demand hardback.
In which territory is that?
This must only be the US, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, I don't know.
I think there is some European one as well, but I'd be interested to know. I know I've been reading a little bit some people's feedback. There's a factory in Eastern Europe. I know people have had some quality issues around it.
Well, so I've ordered one, but it hasn't arrived.
Yeah, okay. It'd be interesting to see where that is. But if it's in the States, that's a different factory. Okay, so where you are now financially, is this panning out for you? Because it's quite a big decision on the basis of the advance, which you said at that time gave you 8 months. Are you now in a position where this is your living?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have been for a good long time now. I was doing fairly well at the newspaper as a journalist, but I've probably increased my income by another probably 60% since then. So I think I'm probably maybe 150K New Zealand.
Great.
So it's not a fortune, but it's certainly comfortable. It's fine. And I've got these 2 new novels coming out, and I expect them to do pretty well. I feel like it's going to be easy enough to contact the surfers of the world and let them know that it's there. It's because all surfers just go to one of about a dozen websites.
Right. You have to release it on call it Big. Is it Big Tuesday? Big Wednesday? I can't remember. Big Wednesday. That film. I did watch it years ago, but you have to launch it on Big Wednesday. Okay. What was let's talk about writing for a bit then. So you've talked a little bit about writing in verse, those children's books, and spending a couple of days perhaps over one line to get it right. Then you moved on to the middle grade novel, which is a very particular type of writing. Vocabulary's got to be right. Pitch of the story has got to be right. And just so I understand, when you say middle grade, what age child is in your mind at writing?
Yeah, 8 to 12.
8 to 12. And what was that like writing? What was that transition like?
It was, I enjoyed it, but I do, it's difficult to, to simplify your vocabulary sometimes. And it's sometimes a little frustrating, you think, oh, that's the perfect words. And you think, oh, maybe that's too tough. But you get used to it, you just sort of muddle along. I've had, for each of my 5 books, I've had a different editor for each one of them. I've hired a different editor. Some haven't been available and I've had to get somebody else. But I've been so pleased that I've had so many editors because they've all been great and I've learned something different from all of them. So,
well, different editors because people weren't available, or did you sack your editors and move on?
A couple of times, yeah. And then other times somebody said, oh, why don't you try these guys? They're really good. So, and at that point I'd had to change 3 times and I thought, yeah, this is actually really good for me to use a different editor each time. So that's great, yeah.
And learn something more. And now you're writing for grown-ups, where you can use the word discombobulate now if you want.
Exactly.
Although I think you're still advised. Where did I read somewhere that you're supposed to stick your vocab at kind of age 12 for novels, which seems crazy to me. But anyway, I read somewhere that. So now you've got to. Does it feel a bit more free in your writing?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think you probably spend more time on each sentence. I'm not very good. I read a book from the Sterling and Stone guys, How to Write Fast, and it talks about doing your vomit draft and just spewing it all out, getting it out quickly. But I just can't do it. I can't leave a sentence that's awful and just carry on. I'd far rather go back. Before I even start writing for the day, I'll go back over what I wrote yesterday, fix it all up, get it to where I like it, and then I'll move on. It's just not pleasurable to just vomit it out. But I did actually, funnily enough, for the story that I'm writing at the moment, for the novel set in Ireland, it's quite unusual because it begins in the middle of the kind of the space and time where it's set. Begins in the middle. The first chapter moves forward. The second, chapter 2, goes back from the middle and then moves up to the middle. Chapter 3 moves on from where chapter 2 ended. Chapter 4 goes back to before chapter 2. So the story gets further and further apart at each end, and you learn things. And so that's been it was quite a challenge for a long time. I didn't think it was going to even be possible because it was just such a head scramble. So I had to plan that whole thing out on a great big piece of paper and write what's going to happen. And you learn things, in the later chapters that actually took place earlier in time that explain the reason why things are happening now. And so I really enjoyed it. It's been an amazing kind of experience.
So kind of almost
interesting to see how people react to it.
Memento style
exactly,
revelations.
I love that film.
And that's a great film, yeah. With an Australian, I think, in the lead role of that one.
Yeah, Guy
Pearce, isn't it? And what? So that obviously, as you say, took an amount of plotting. So you didn't do a rough draft. And when you've plotted it and you're writing now, because of that framework, and by the sounds of it, the way that you write, you're not just sitting there writing, I wonder what will happen in this scene.
No, actually I am. I do a lot of pantsing.
Okay.
Yeah. If I plotted everything out, I'd be so bored. I love how things pop into your head and you go, oh my God, that is good. Like and I love how that happens. It's one of the most pleasurable parts of writing, how those things just sort of appear out of nowhere and throw the story into disarray and you have to figure out how it's all going to work. But so that is the most, I've plotted more on this novel than I ever have. I might have a general idea when I start a novel of what's going to happen, where it's going to end. But in general, I do an awful lot of pantsing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the reason I can't go too fast either, because it's sort of, if I write really slowly and, polish everything as I go, it gives my brain time to figure out what's going to happen next, I think.
To ruminate, yes. Okay. What's your writing routine, James?
Usually first thing in the morning. Actually, for the first lockdown we had, the children were sleeping in quite late, and I would get up at 6 and I'd work for 2 hours. And it was great. It's amazing to be able to have that clear early morning, mind space. So it's usually in the morning that I'll write. But if I'm fired up about the way a story's going, I'll just chip away at it all day, and I might just drop in and out and do some emails. Or I've got about 25,000 books in my garage downstairs. I know it's terrible. Most people say you shouldn't do it, but I can't. And I could give it away to a New Zealand distributor. They'd take it at hand and all, But my wife helps me out with sending books off around New Zealand. And, there's only 300 bookshops in New Zealand. So
you're a wholesale distributor of your own books. You really are a self-publisher. You've got the entire production chain.
The whole thing. Yep.
Yeah.
And I often talk to the store owners. I know them all. You can ring them all in 3 days. So it's kind of, in fact, when I was still back at the New Zealand Herald, at the newspaper, I would, when I wrote the first picture book, I'd go out for lunch. I'd sit in a cafe, and I would ring. I had a big list of bookstores. I'd ring them one after another. Say, will you take my book? Will you take my book? And of course, most of them went, no. Who are you?
Yeah.
And I just kept at them. And every time I hit a sales milestone, I'd ring them back, say, listen, I've sold 5,000 books now. You sure you don't want to take it? And they'd go, no. One store I rang 8 times, Paper Plus, Papamoa, and before they agreed finally to take it, and now they sell plenty of them. So
did they agree so that you wouldn't phone them anymore?
So I don't phone them too much anymore because I don't have to. Generally, they always just email in their orders. But
excellent.
I like to have a chat to them every now and again.
Yeah.
And New Zealand's small, so I'm often going to book fairs or to festivals, or I'll go on a school book tour, and I'll always drop in and say hello, when I'm in town. So yeah, I visit a lot of schools. I do probably 50 or 60 school visits a year.
So presumably, are you somewhere near Auckland? I guess the newspaper's probably based there as well.
Yes, I'm in Auckland. Yeah.
You're in Auckland, yeah. Okay, so you've got your little empire there, James.
Yeah, sure do.
And those trad deals on the picture books, are they 7 years or in perpetuity? I mean, what's the deal there?
That's a good question. They're in perpetuity, I think. Yeah, if they stop printing, or if they go out of print for a certain amount of time, I think I get the rights back. But to be honest, they haven't looked at the contract really for a long time. I think they're still selling, and they will be selling now on the back of the strength of the middle grade novels, because the middle grade novels that are on Amazon in the front couple of pages have a picture of the 3 picture books. So they're getting some promotion that way, and they really do kind of cross pollinate. They sell each other.
And what's your future then? You've got these 2 surfing novels, for want of a better. I mean, I call them surfing novels. What is the genre outside of the setting being a surfing setting?
Outdoor adventure. I don't know what the actual.
Is it a mystery
genre.
or?
No, they're not mystery. They would be thrillers, I guess. Yes, okay. Definitely thrillers. Yeah, suspense thrillers.
Okay.
The one in Ireland's got an Aussie protagonist. He's the main character, and he gets caught up in drug running.
The Aussie's the baddie.
No, the Aussie's the good guy. Well, he's the main character. He's a good guy.
Oh, he's a good guy.
He gets caught up with this drug running kind of ring, and
because I know there's a rivalry between the two of you. But normally the British are the baddies, and everyone else is genres. But
yeah, I don't know why. I think I wanted to do an Australian protagonist because Australia's got a lot of surfers.
Yes,
so,
of course. Yeah.
I think that was a marketing decision on my part.
Yeah.
I don't particularly write to market, but I try and stay a little bit wise to when I'm making those decisions, who's going to be the big market in this. And I'd love to get those books translated. Portuguese, there's an awful lot of surfers in Brazil.
In Brazil, yeah.
I'm getting them, I'm launching them as picture books, as paperbacks and audio books at the same time. So I've got a young Aussie actor narrating number 1 at the moment, and as soon as I'm finished number 2, I'll send that to him as well. So that's exciting. So I'm going to launch them as audiobooks at the same time.
Excellent. And what's next after that?
Ooh, I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, you've gone through the age groups now. Unless you're going to write octogenarian literature.
I'd be crazy not to write another children's book series. I think just because I have a big following now.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of very loyal. Every time I go to a school, there's always half a dozen kids just shaking with excitement to meet me. They're real fan. It's that kind of fan stuff, which is just brilliant. To see the kids loving them so much.
That is brilliant, and you're converting kids into readers, which is the most brilliant thing.
Yeah. Actually, I got the best one. I was in a bookshop, and a lady came up to me, and she said her 10-year-old son, she went into his room and she saw he had his duvet pulled over his head, and she could see the light from the iPad coming out from underneath it. And she went, "You little," and she grabbed the duvet and ripped it back. But he was using the light from the iPad to read one of my books. And I thought that's good stuff.
That's cool.
He's choosing to read a book instead of use the iPad when he's got both options.
Superb. Well, James, thank you very much indeed for coming on all the way from Kiwi land down there in New Zealand.
Pleasure. I listen to you guys all the time. I live right on a volcanic cone here, so most days I run up that mountain and I pick a podcast and listen to it. So I'm really appreciative of everything that yourself and Mark have done to open up this world, really, because I knew nothing about this whole new thing. So it just started in January. This whole new thing of Amazon and all that has just been a mystery to me. So it's quite exciting to be able to do it and do it reasonably well, just because of the advice that I get from you guys on the podcasts.
Oh, that's very kind of you. And I've got an image in my mind now for next time we're recording the podcast wrap of somebody running up a volcano. So I always imagine people in the gym or on a dog walk. Is it?
It's dormant.
It's dormant, is it? Well, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of activity in New Zealand recently, isn't there? But
there is.
That one's dormant. Yeah, indeed. Okay, James, again, thank you so much indeed. Brilliant to have you on. Good luck with those surfing novels. Let us know when they're out and we'll give you a shout on the podcast again.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me. All the best.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
There you go. Interesting ideas from James. It's obviously very adventurous and imaginary in the way that he approaches marketing. Mark, augmented reality for children. I think it's a good idea.
I don't think his marketing is imaginary. I think it's imaginative.
Imaginative, yes.
If it's imaginary, he won't be doing much marketing. I'm looking at his website now, but I haven't had the benefit of listening to the interview before we've spoken about it. But his website is quite interesting, and he's clearly got some unusual ideas. Normally, when we get unusual ideas, I think generally, I've said this to Joanna Penny is quite big on futurism and stuff like that, and I usually say to Joanna, she's about 5 years too early. So she was about 5 years too early with translation. Her new thing is kind of
AI,
non-fungible. No, well, yes, that and things like NFTs, so non-fungible tokens and things, which she's quite keen on. Again, I think that's probably a little early, but I certainly could be proven wrong. But this with augmented reality, I think there's a very strong possibility that it's more than that. Apple is working on Apple Glass, so that's going to be AR, and looks like that might be announced in the next 6 to 12 months. So these kinds of interesting ideas are going to become much more mainstream as we move on. Yeah.
So on the one hand, you could think, well, let's get children off devices and reading books. So why are you introducing devices to it? But of course, it's not like that. Children are going to be on their devices, and actually integrating it and making book reading part of that, I think, is a really good idea. And particularly, as James points out, children with dyslexia helps them because reading can be more challenging for them than watching some of the stories come to life can give them some relief from that. And also just this idea, hiding eggs around Auckland, getting publicity like that, and relentlessly contacting the bookshops in New Zealand to say, stock my book, until they eventually just wearily gave in and now will stock his book.
Squeaky hinge.
Leaky hinge. What's that called?
Leaky hinge? No, squeaky hinge.
Hinge, yes.
Hinge can't leak, but it can squeak.
Well, if you put too much oil on it.
The squeaky hinge gets the oil. So that's exactly. I've done that a few times with just basically making such a nuisance of yourself that eventually they do what you want just to get rid of you.
Yeah. And here I am. Right.
Exactly. There you go.
There you go. Okay. Thank you very much indeed to James for being our guest today. Don't forget, we have that webinar with Janet Margot coming up on Monday, the 28th of June. You can go to selfpublishingformula.com/Amazon. You'll also get replay links in the when we send the replay out, get replay links to all the replays from our 3 webinars we've run recently, all of which are full of actionable insights for you and your author career. That's it from us. Have a great week reading and a great week writing. All that remains for me to say is a goodbye from him.
And goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.